New data shows inflation is cooling. The Consumer Price Index shows prices increased 3.4% compared to a year ago and fell 0.1% since last month.
That number right there may be Donald Trump's biggest political problem. Inflation, 3.4%. Americans are still pissed about prices. So what is Trump doing? He's making the problem even worse. Again. And this time, for one incredibly stupid reason. In his sick mind, he cannot afford to look weak. Point.
The Supreme Court ruling that President Trump's use of these emergency tariffs that he has implemented are illegal.
6 months ago, the Supreme Court ruled that Trump had exceeded his authority when he imposed his sweeping emergency tariffs. So that should have been the end of it, right? Of course not. Trump simply reached for another law, and this time he went after Canada. 50% tariffs. About $20 billion worth of Canadian products, nearly 5% of Canada's exports to the United States. And these tariffs even hit products that had previously qualified for protection under USMCA, Trump's own North American trade agreement.
The Trump administration is saying, boo freaking who? Canada has been violating the spirit of free trade for years.
And this is where I think the real motivation becomes obvious. Trump cannot go back to MAGA and say, the Supreme Court stopped me, Canada resisted me, so I gave up. His entire political brand is built around one word, strength. He must always look like the toughest guy in the room. So this is no longer simply trade policy. It's political theater. It's posturing. Point. The Supreme Court said no. Trump basically said, fine, find me another statute. And then came the first sign that all this toughness might not be quite as tough as advertised.
50% tariffs on Canada have been put on hold. President Trump says he made a last-minute deal.
Just hours before the tariffs were supposed to take effect, Trump postponed them. 3 days, and then announced that America and Canada had a deal.
Any update on your negotiations with Canada for a trade deal?
Yeah, we had a very good conversation with the Prime Minister last night, and we've come to a deal with Canada.
Except Canada did not exactly say that. Mark Carney said there had been substantial progress, but he also said, important work remains to be done. Trump, we have a deal, Canada. Well, not so fast.
Phrase that is sort of buzzing around Wall Street, and it's called taco trading or a taco trade. It stands for Trump always chickens out.
This is exactly Trump's political problem. If he backs down, MAGA sees weakness. If he doesn't back down, the economic cost gets bigger. Taco is back. But this time with maple syrup, except 3 days later, the joke stopped being funny.
We have breaking news. After weeks of negotiations and a last-minute extension, Canada and the U.S. failed to reach a trade deal before Donald Trump's deadline. New U.S. tariffs of 50% are now in effect on nearly $20 billion worth of Canadian goods.
The negotiations failed, the tariffs went into effect, 50%, and Carney immediately suspended the talks and announced Canada will retaliate dollar for dollar. This is no longer a threat. Trump actually pulled the trigger. And here is the part Trump badly miscalculated. Because Carney has his own political problem. He cannot afford to look weak either. In fact, politically, standing up to Trump has been extremely good for him. Trump's threats helped transform Canadian politics in 2025. Carney built a huge part of his political identity around one message. Canada will not be bullied. And today, his approval rating has just hit 60%. His Liberals are comfortably ahead. So why on earth would Carney suddenly roll over?
This data showing Mark Carney's Liberals are the ballot box choice of 44% of decided and leaning voters. That means they were asked, which party would you vote for if there was an election held today?
Trump needs Canada to surrender. Carney needs Canadians to see him refusing to surrender. That is the trap. And somebody in the Trump administration actually explained it perfectly.
At a fundraiser last night, Vance described Carney as a very sweet guy, but said the prime minister is trying to out-tough President Trump. He added that it's hilarious for Carney to present the temporary tariff pause as a victory.
Thank you, JD. Honestly, you just summarized my entire video. And Canadians have already figured out what happens when Trump throws the first punch.
We didn't start this trade war. President Trump decided to go after his closest ally and friend, his number one customer in the entire world. And yes, the U.S. is our number one customer. It's unnecessary.
That is exactly the lesson Carney learned. You don't make a bully stop by rewarding the bullying. You make the cost of bullying higher. And politically, Canadian voters clearly reward resistance to Trump. So Trump has created an opponent who has every incentive to keep fighting him. Apparently, lunch money diplomacy has limits, which brings us to the people who ultimately get stuck in the middle, Americans.
The longest trade talks yet still haven't resulted in a deal. Just hours before, new tariffs are set to come into place.
We have more work to do. We're going to continue working up until the last minute. Our job is not finished.
The failed agreement covered real money and real industries: steel, aluminum, cars, lumber, dairy, American alcohol, electronics, plastics, furniture. The proposed deal could have cut some steel and aluminum tariffs to 25% and auto tariffs to 15%. Canada was considering removing some retaliatory duties. Washington wanted more access for American dairy products and American alcohol. Instead, the negotiations collapsed. Canada retaliates. Trump can retaliate against the retaliation. And suddenly, we have exactly what economists warned about: an escalation spiral. Cars, cheese, whiskey, and hockey sticks. Apparently, this is how great powers fight now. But here is where this stops being Canada's problem and becomes Trump's affordability problem.
It's been 1 year of the Trump administration and 1 year of tariffs. So what does that mean for you? Well, prices you would think would start rising a lot.
A tariff is paid when goods enter the United States. That means an American importer suddenly has a higher cost. Maybe the company absorbs some of it, maybe the Canadian supplier absorbs some, but the cost does not magically disappear. Some of it can end up in prices. And when the tariff is 50%, there is a lot of cost to absorb. Steel goes into cars and appliances, aluminum goes into manufacturing, lumber goes into houses, plastics and electronics flow through thousands of products. Trump is adding new price pressure to an economy where inflation is already 3.4% and rising.
Relief on prices, and Wall Street will take it. The first inflation report of 2026 coming in cooler than expected, enough to calm investor nerves and push the Federal Reserve to maybe more rate cuts.
Trump's defenders will tell you tariffs don't cause inflation. Fine. Not every tariff becomes a one-for-one price increase, but businesses do not pay a new 50% import tax with fairy dust. Someone eats the cost. And eventually, consumers can eat part of it too.
Looks like they're largely in line, in fact, exactly in line with estimates. 0.1% increase month over month in headline inflation. The core number ticking up 0.2%. Year over year headline inflation rising 3.4% in the month of July.
And this is what makes Trump's strategy politically insane. He ran on affordability. He promised lower prices. Cost of living is already one of his biggest political vulnerabilities. And now, simply because he needs to prove to MAGA that nobody can push Donald Trump around, he is escalating a trade war with one of America's biggest trading partners. Put out the inflation fire, add a 50% tariff, what could possibly go wrong? And that brings us right back to where we started. American voters do not care who looked toughest in a meeting with Canada. They care what things cost. They care about groceries, cars, housing, bills, affordability. Trump can tell MAGA he won. He can call Carney weak. He can announce the greatest trade victory in human history. But if Americans end up paying more, none of that matters. Trump wanted to look strong. Carney had every political reason to fight back. And now Trump has turned a battle over his own image into another risk for American prices. He promised affordability. Instead, he is pouring fuel on the inflation fire. And on the issue that can hurt him politically more than almost anything else, Donald Trump is shooting himself in the foot. Again. And once again, he is blowing it spectacularly. Again. If you're tired of political theater making everything more expensive, like and subscribe so that YouTube puts our videos into your feed, and tell me in the comments, should Canada fight back, or would that only make the affordability crisis worse?